Agenda. So if we have any members of the public that wish to speak, I'm going to call on you first, and then we're going to get into approval of the minutes. And then as well for our staff, for those of you who are going to speak, if you could please just say your first and last name, because it is audio recording, and we greatly appreciate that. So first and last name and your department. And with that being said, our first member of the public that wishes to speak is Peter Katz. Peter.
Yeah, I just want to make, I'm Peter Katz, I'm president of the Comlink Board. I just want to make a couple general comments, on bringing revenue in here. And, Michelle, at the last city council meeting, you raised a very important issue about the number of vacant pieces of land in this city and the number of nonprofits that pay no taxes and et cetera. What I see lacking in this city, we need a marketing director that's going to go out and market these properties to convince those owners of those properties to put in some sort of development. We can't keep relying on property tax, which only goes up 2%. And our revenues go up 4%, it's not working, and whether we get a share of this. I don't know if you heard the Supreme Court rule this morning in favor of off-track sports books, and California's already introduced a piece of legislation to place it on the 2020 ballot, whether it's going to be like the lottery system where it's sold at all 7-Elevens, or whether there's going to be sport bookshops. They haven't come to that decision yet, and whether we're going to share in that revenue or not. So, but I think that's something we need to push for and drive that home. And I just think that there's too many vacant lands that we need to put pressure. One Broadway Plaza, the Register property. I mean, there's a lot of properties in the city that can bring in revenue. The jail is another one. We're just kicking the can down the road, and we need to start thinking about how we're going to bring some money in here, because I don't think the property owners of this city and the voters of this city is going to support a sales tax revenue increase. I think that will go down to defeat. So those are my comments.
Thank you, Mr. Peter Katz. If we can please have roll call, Madam Clerk.
Chairperson Michelle Martinez.
Present.
Councilmember Vincent. I cannot talk today. I'm sorry.
That'll work. Here.
Thank you.
Great. Approval of the minutes. Could I get a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second, all those in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Great. Next, we are doing a verbal update on the housing opportunity ordinance, and I'm going to call in Min Tai and Candida.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. Candida Neal will be presenting the details of this report.
First and last name, please.
Candida Neal, Planning and Building Agency. And I'd like to talk to you a little bit tonight about where we are on the Housing Opportunity Ordinance and where we're going. The Housing Opportunity Ordinance has in the ordinance itself a requirement that we have to review it by the full council before December 31st, 2018. And there's a number of issues that staff has come up with, and we'd like any of your direction on these items as well. And the first one is the density bonus that our Housing Opportunity Ordinance offers. We would like to look at or consider adding to the ordinance some merit-based criteria that would allow us to require or develop or encourage including community benefits as part of a tit-for-tat on the increased density. Another issue that we'd like for the council to consider is some policy considerations regarding just the general location of affordable housing. Where do we want them located? What kind of projects? Do we want them concentrated in one area of the city or interspersed throughout the city? Do we want affordable housing units in market rates project, or do we want to have larger projects where we might have 200 or 300 units of affordable housing? Another thing we're looking at, and something that has come up before, was the payment of the in lieu fee, the timing of it. And although we had suggested, we were looking at perhaps changing that, or a developer had requested changing it, and it wasn't necessarily approved. One thing we may want to consider is whether or not to look at the timing of payment and structure our fee so that if you pay it early, say you pay a lower fee than if you pay it later. So at building permit stage, perhaps your fee would only be $18 per square foot, but at certificate of occupancy, it might be 25. So there may be that may be something we might want to look at. The other thing is, one thing that's been really disappointing, I think, in the implementation of the Housing Opportunity Ordinance is that we have not had actually constructed as part of our market rate housing, we haven't had constructed any affordable units in those projects. So how do we encourage developers to actually construct the housing as part of their projects instead of just opting out and going for the in lieu fee? Probably the third thing that we may want to bring up is the role and the nature of the developer's input and the council's discretion on the allocation of the housing funds themselves. So those were the items that we as staff had considered, and if you have any things that you would like to add to that list or any discussion you'd like,
Councilmember
we'd be
Sarmiento?
happy to hear it.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And so those are all good points. I mean, those are ones that I think we need to revisit, and I think they're consistently recurring issues with the ordinance. So, my understanding was that the guiding document for location, just to tackle one of the elements or one of the issues that you were mentioning, was found in the housing element, at least part of it, right, to where direction was given, and those sites change over time. Some of them may be more necessary, more immediate than others, but that would be one source of where we could, find and encourage people to look at. As far as the ordinance as with respect to the in lieu fee and the timing, I think what's important here is I know that the in lieu option was made available for those who didn't want to build on site or didn't want to build separately. So we want to give them a way to opt out but still capture some funding, so we could cobble together a lot of or money from different developments to be able to construct our own or help somebody come in and do that. But I mean, really, I think we've spoken here at this committee, and I think we've spoken at the council, that the real goal is hopefully for them to build on site.
I know.
And so to the extent that we motivate better, and I don't know what that means, whether it's, you don't want to be punitive on anybody, but you certainly want to provide maybe some flexibility and some relaxation of other conditions if somebody does build on site. And we've been able to do that with some. I mean, we've adjusted the number of units, we've adjusted certain other things, but yeah, I think on the density bonus issue, some developers will say it's a perfunctory ministerial decision, and it's something that really doesn't commit or bind the city, but it does make it appear that we're going down this path, and sometimes that in and of itself creates an expectation in the developer that the city is prepared to finance something down the road. So I'm always wary of that, because even if there's no binding contract, if you act like there is in the law, there's a reliance to your detriment. They could make that legal argument that they have spent money towards this and nobody told them not to, so they could recover that. That's recoverable in costs. So it is a dangerous step if we're not fully supportive of something. So all those points are good. I think it's it's important that we revisit those. We started with good intentions. I think we remain having good intentions. One last thing was an exemption from this whole housing opportunity ordinance. So my understanding is that any applications that predated the adoption of the ordinance, would be exempt, right, from those requirements. There's probably not many, because it's been years now that we've adopted some iteration of this. So I know that there's one development in particular where I know the applicant believes they have standing to do that. So I don't know of any, applications or any projects or developments that are exempt at this point, because it has been such a long time, but just something for us to look at.
Okay.
Great. Thank you, Councilman Sarmiento. I would say, Candida, can you tell me when there's a trigger if in case there's an applicant and there needs to be say a zoning change? Is there kind of a trigger in regards to the who? And I think there's some inconsistencies. Can you share some of that with us and what that process is like?
The trigger for the who is if you are changing the zoning or the general plan to accommodate your project. So that's the basic trigger. But the other trigger that happens is in the transit zoning code, where the base zone is industrial. We gave them the opportunity, we put the overlay zone on it so that if they wanted to develop it as residential, they could. But our ordinance specifically says that if you trigger that, if you change from industrial in our transit zoning ordinance area, and if you change from industrial and go to residential, it triggers the who. So there's a number of instances like that.
So
where
we have
it
a
does.
couple projects, right, that probably didn't trigger,
Yes.
right? And
yes.
so they're not paying in.
They're not.
And that's unfair. And so I think right there, just on that basis, there is an equity where certain developers, because they need to make the changes because it doesn't meet, their standard. Obviously, we have a 30-year-old general plan and a 60-year-old zoning code. And so those that want to move towards the 21st century, are getting penalized. Those that choose not to go into the 21st century are not getting penalized, which we would hope that we would want those developers. And a great example who, the Northgate Gonzalez family that on 4th Street, they are moving forward with the housing development, are going to be moving their store. I met with them and they're status quo, right? They're not making any changes. I was a little disappointed. Because the streetcar is going to go right through there, and didn't realize that they were not part of the up zone in the downtown. They're still part of the Lacey. I had no idea, and I was educated on that, and extremely disappointed because that was an opportunity, but I did understand why they chose not to make any changes. It takes a year and a half to go through all the various zoning changes. They're not developers. They're a market. I don't even go to the market these days. I don't even know what it's called. A supermarket, a grocery store. And so they hired someone to do this and to move forward to provide housing based on what's happening in our downtown. And they wanted to be partners. But that's just one example, and there have been others. And so I just hope that as we look at this and revamp this, that we want to make sure that there is equity across the board. And then some of the uses, and be very specific. For example, one of the issues that we're dealing with is homeless. And, we need to, obviously in the general fund, we don't have those funds. But if we really want to be proactive, and we need to look at ways of how we can use those housing opportunity ordinance funds. And I think we have a little bit of flexibility, but not a lot. And so it still has to do with housing and what can we do to leverage those opportunities, because if we are going to permanent supportive housing, that is kind of affordable housing. So it makes sense, and there's a nexus. And so how can we leverage that opportunity? The other thing that I would mention as well is that we do have an opportunity as we look at the WHO ordinance, if we go away with it or not, because I too am supportive of making sure that everyone is able to build affordable housing on site. It makes the most sense. We get our bigger bang for our buck, per se, on the city side to building the affordable housing on site. I definitely understand why the developers choose to do the in lieu. One thing that I would encourage, because we are having a problem, and I think I mentioned this to you a week or so ago, that there's an opportunity as we look at Section 8 housing. We're having difficulty with a certain apartment, be willing to accept Section 8 housing with these new developments that are coming in the pipeline. How can we leverage that opportunity? Money is money, whether it's a Section 8 voucher or not. It's still translated into dollars. And so how can we leverage that and work with the development community, especially those market rate that choose to do affordable housing on site, and being able to say, hey, look, we can also move towards doing Section 8 housing on that site. And again, that's rent money that's coming in. And so not only are are we helping them on the affordable housing end, but as well making sure that they have tenants and that are within the Section 8 that will have constant funds coming in to pay their rent. Because that is a big barrier right now as we look throughout our city. And more importantly, a lot of these apartments, are pretty much run down. And so we have an opportunity with the new apartment developments that are coming into play that we should have those conversations as well with the developer. And again, it's one that supports our affordable housing and provides the necessary funding that they need to sustain their projects. In particular with the affordable housing units if they do them on site. So those would be my only comments. And if there are no more comments,
Just one
Councilman
real brief
Sarmiento?
one, just, and I think, I had a conversation with the city manager, and I think maybe with you, Candida, as well. So there are sometimes some projects come before us, and they meet all the criteria, they can do things almost by right, and, quantitatively, there's no problem with it, but qualitatively, maybe there is, right? And so I want you as staff to be able to, comment and say, look, they've met and checked all the boxes and, everything's been addressed, but this just doesn't seem to make sense, whether it's based on location, unit mix, the affordability levels that they're presenting, and need, right? So, if we have something like that, we certainly don't want you to be silent because that doesn't help us in decision making. The more, the more comprehensive you can be in your opinion and your comments, and they don't have to be subjective. They could just say, look, this doesn't meet the needs that your demography here in Santa Ana requires, right? And so those are the things that, some of these things are just non-quantifiable, right? But it just doesn't seem to make sense, whether it's a parking, whether it's something else. So we need that because it helps, especially those, some of us on the council that may not be looking at this as deeply. And so those comments are going to be really well received, at least, for me. So please have the, feel free to do that. Thank you.
Councilman, and Madam Mayor Pro Tem, your comments are well received. I too agree, as well as some of these projects, while they're, like you said, can be approved by right, they still create impact that we as community need to look at. In addition to that, we also need to make sure that our community receive the benefits from these projects so that, our residents benefit. And that's one of the things that we as staff will be looking forward to. And I'll talk a little bit more about with the next item, but I think this item, the next discussion will lead right into this whole discussion about coordination.
Great, and with that, take it away, man.
Thank you. So this is the presentation for an update of the general plan update process. So the city initiated the update of the general plan in 2016, and this is a much needed update to the existing general plan since, I believe, 1991. The original estimated budget is about $2 to $2.75 million to complete both the general plan document itself as well as the environmental impact report. To date, staff have completed extensive public outreach and community engagement meetings with the community through meeting out to the community as well as going to community events. The staff has also completed their process with the General Plan Advisory Committee, which consists of members of the community and stakeholders to provide input on policy directions. They have also completed a draft statement, vision statement, which we will be presenting to the City Council. So the next step for us in terms of this process is to bring the draft vision back and the policy document back to the City Council for checking in, making sure that we're on the right path, and that you can also have an opportunity, and the full council an opportunity to provide input. We're also looking to initiate the general plan policy framework this year. This is the difficult challenge of taking all of those policy directions to now formulate actual guidelines and policies to help us implement the general plan. We will also continue to check back with the City Council through either a quarterly process, or we'll check back on major milestones so that we're making sure we're on path and providing the council with an opportunity to comment on the general plan update process. What's also will be left to do, and this is a significant part of the process, is the draft general plan itself as well as the EIR process. As you know, the EIR will need to be completed for the general plan. And our staff is approaching this from a very creative process to where we're using a self-mitigating process to implement. So the general plan policy will be implementing the mitigations that's coming out of the EIR. So it's a very efficient process, and it makes sure that we keep consistent policy with the impact, mitigating it. So today, we have expended about $985,000 on this entire process. We estimate that there will probably need to be an additional $1.43 million for us to complete. Part of that comes from the AQMD, part of that comes from SCAG, but the majority of it will have to come locally. We will be presenting the City Council with a budget, more detailed budget, and I do have additional sheets with this presentation that shows the details of that, but this is the overall kind of 30,000 foot
Just
review.
very quickly, Min, in 2013, when we had our interim city manager, Kevin O'Rourke, when we first approved the general plan funding, it says, O'Rourke said that the budget, the council gave its initial approval to also include the updated citywide plan zoning ordinance, which would cost $2.6 million in the next couple of years, as well as a $250,000 community vision process economic development strategy. So in 2013, this city council approved $2.6 million and $250,000 to get this general plan updated. And so it's my expectation, and I think the expectation of the city council, that that money is still available to complete this plan. And so I don't think that we need additional revenue, because the money was allocated in addition to the grant funding that you all receive. You should have sufficient amount of money to complete this plan without coming to this city council for any kind of additional funding, unless what we approved was changed and was never brought to the city council. And so I would just ask Mr. City Manager, are you aware that that money is not available, or is it still in an account?
You know, I believe that previous administrations may have taken that money out because it was not being used. But having said that, I actually am hearing loud and clear, and heard loud and clear that this is a priority. And even if I hadn't heard, it would be a big priority for me. I mean, to have an updated general plan it's a seminal document for land use. We need to update it, and it's important for our economic development, especially in light of the fact that we lost redevelopment. All we have really at this point in terms of incentivizing development is our land use policy. So we will continue to make it a priority.
Great. Councilman Sarmiento?
No, I mean, that kind of summarizes it. I guess our hope is that there's going to be funding. We never thought it was spent, and boy, this is the slowest expenditure I've ever
Exactly.
seen. $985 or $985,000 over a 5-year period. So that's being very frugal. So in that sense, good. In the sense that this was, as you said, I don't think, what was it, 1991? Is that?
I think the last time it was updated, it was around 1991. Or was it 2001?
So.
1991.
So one of the good things that I can tell you is that our new PBA director in a past life has actually gone through this process, and it was an award-winning general plan at the end of the day. Right. So he has the experience in getting it done.
Setting the bar high. So
Fantastic. Thanks, Min. We look forward to working with you. And thank you, Candida, for moving us thus far, and wanting to thank the SCAG staff for the work that they've done. And I know on the mapping, and really helped move our city staff forward as well. So thank you. I know you all got to get going. You have a planning meeting. Wanted to get you guys out of here. So thank you all so very much. Next item, we are moving to the 17th and Tustin presentation. And we have 2 speakers. The first person I'm going to call on is on Jennifer Dahl, and then followed by Katie Sanchez.
Good evening. My name is Jennifer Daw, and I am the development manager for Chick-fil-A. I also have Katie Sanchez, who is also the development manager for In-N-Out, and Peter Whittingham, our public affairs, here to answer any questions which you may have this evening. So for the past 3 years, we have been working with the County of Orange and the City of Santa Ana, seeking necessary approvals for the development of this project. This project consists of a joint development with Chick-fil-A and In-N-Out, and we are here tonight asking for you to direct staff to move forward with the necessary annexation request for our approval to extend the sewer line in Ponderosa. This is required to obtain the necessary approvals from the County of Orange for the development of this project. This is the only item which is preventing our project approvals from moving forward, and currently we are on hold for all necessary reviews with the County of Orange. It's kind of complicated, as the County of Orange is requesting an outside service agreement for our use of our sewer system from the City of Santa Ana for the development. However, LAFCO is requiring us to annex this property into the city for our sewer use. It should be noted, though, that the Tustin Water District will serve this project as well, and the City of Tustin has no issues with this request. The county indicated that we needed some form of a commitment, like an outside service agreement, from the city, indicating that the city will allow us to use the sewer and/or eventually annexation will happen. Once some sort of a commitment is received, the County of Orange will deem this acceptable and continue the review and the necessary approvals for the project for us to commence development. As mentioned, the project is currently on hold until the county provides us such. While our landlord is unable to attend this evening, it should be noted that they, the Hall family, have owned this property for decades, just as a family business as the Reckenbacker Incorporation, which has been situated in thriving Santa Ana for more than decades, since the 1950s. And if you recall, this property was once leased to the thrifty Rite Aid in the late 1990s for at least a decade. They would greatly appreciate the city cooperating on whatever it takes for this development of the property so that it no longer looks like a blighted corner as it currently is, and instead becomes a productive, civilized, income-producing property for the benefit of the respective tenants, the city, and the county, and the property owner. The overall site development, excluding Chick-fil-A and In-N-Out building cost, is roughly $4.5 million for the site improvements. And on behalf of Chick-fil-A, we look forward to being a part of the City of Santa Ana community, providing high-quality food, locally owned business, excellent customer service, community involvement, and a welcoming environment for all guests. In fact, each of our restaurants are locally owned and operated business with employment and tax benefits going back to the local community. Each location creates over 80 new and full-time jobs, and Chick-fil-A is committed to local hiring for both the selection of the franchisee, our operator, and in return, the operator hires within the community. We actually receive over 32,000 applications a year from individuals who express wanting to be a Chick-fil-A operator. We strive to provide all the best for our employees and staff, a positive workforce, and opportunities for leadership development and promotion for management roles. And we know how to take care of our guests. We need to make sure that our team members are taken care of first. So in order to do this, we attract the top talent and offer highly competitive wages that are frequently above all minimum wages. We have a respect for work balance, and in fact, everyone is guaranteed Sundays off, which started from our founder.
Great, if you can conclude.
Yeah,
Thank you.
so I will. So I will actually now turn this over to Ms. Katie Sanchez for the development manager, and then I will wrap this up.
Fantastic, thank you.
Good afternoon, Katie Sanchez with In-N-Out Burger. Just what Jennifer went over the scope, so I'll skip to basically In-N-Out business. So as you all know, City of Santa Ana is in desperate need for a new or an additional In-N-Out restaurant. We're actually going to knock down our existing one and rebuild a bigger one as well, which I'm not sure if everyone knows that or not. But in addition to that, the Civic Center one. Yep. So we are in the process of purchasing the 3 lots next to that one and rebuilding one. So with that said, I think in addition to our Santa Ana projects, we need a new one in the city. So just like Jennifer had mentioned, we've been working on this project with Chick-fil-A and the owner for the last 3 years. It's been a long process, and now we're at the point where we need some assistance from the city to help us get through. As soon as we can get through this entitlement process with the county, I know Chick-fil-A and In-N-Out, we're ready to go forward, and as soon as we get permits to start the project. So just some quick background and some information on the company. We have been open since 1948. It's not a franchise property. It's family owned. There's actually one owner now who's the granddaughter of the original owners of the company. We provide over minimum wage to all of our associates, and we hope to hire from within. Me being one of them, I started with the company when I was 16. It was a month after my 16th birthday, and still with it, my husband as well. So we are looking to provide 60 to 100 new job opportunities, and that's just not the part-time high school, but to go into careers. That's majority. We don't have a very high turnover rate. So we're looking to put, I believe it's 104 parking spaces in there shared with Chick-fil-A. Our drive-through queue is going to be at 29. There's going to be 14 in the lane. And just to give you a sight of what the Civic Center one is, there's only, I believe, 6 that fit into that store. That store has 1 grill and 3 fryers. This one will have 3 grills, 6 fryers. So it's a whole different animal, for lack of better words. Yeah, lots of burgers and fries. So like I said, Jennifer pretty much covered the scope. So that's about all I have.
Great, thank you so very much. And any comments from our staff? Yes, City Manager Godinez. Deputy City Manager
This is Robert Cortez, Deputy City Manager for the City of Santa Ana. Good afternoon, Mayor Pro Tem Martinez and Council Member Vicente Sarmiento. We have before you here today an opportunity regarding the 17th Street and Tustin Avenue County unincorporated island. And what you have here is a snapshot of what the entire island looks like. It is about 24.7 acres for the entire island, and the actual property in question where the development is being proposed is actually located here to the western, or to the west side where you see the star is the vacant property. That is approximately 3.3 acres. It is owned by the Hall Family Trust, and you heard from the speakers, it's been owned by the Hall Family Trust for some time now. The owner of this vacant land is interested in developing the area, and right now it has been working with Chick-fil-A as well as In-N-Out Burger for some time. We've been in discussions with the county as well as other folks here in the city in regards to the development of the site and the opportunity that it presents to the city of Santa Ana. Given the changes that we've had in the leadership level, city manager's office, the project has stalled on as far as moving forward. The development needs for both Chick-fil-A and for In-N-Out to be successful, it requires a connection to the nearest sewer line. And this is where the city of Santa Ana comes into play. In order to connect to the nearest sewer line, the city must enter into an out-of-area or out-of-service area agreement that needs to be approved by the county as well as LAFCO. Otherwise, they will not allow the development to go forward. Currently, both Chick-fil-A as well as In-N-Out Burger have gone through the process of obtaining permits, and they're in the process of obtaining additional permits, but have been stalled because they now need a firm commitment from an agency, in this case the City of Santa Ana, in order to move forward. So there's a number of different steps required for the annexation, and what I'm going to show you here is just a snapshot of some of the steps that need to occur in order for the city to enter into an out-of-area service agreement and then eventually into an annexation if the city chooses to do so. So first, it's adoption of a resolution demonstrating a commitment by the city that we're going to be filling out an application to LAFCO as well as making a commitment of a future annexation. The annexation does not have to happen immediately. It can happen over time. We would then enter into an out-of-area service agreement to be able to provide the sewer connections. We would more than likely have to have a series of community meetings to have the discussions about the development and the city's annexation of this vacant land. Obviously, potentially some general plan amendments and changes there, and then eventually a negotiation with the county in terms of the property tax exchange agreement. This is where it provides the city, if it so chooses to do, to negotiate what kind of property tax value should be coming back to the city. Estimated rough cost to do this type of a process is anywhere between $158,000 to about $208,000 for the entire process. Obviously, if the city makes a commitment to go this direction, we could probably negotiate a lower rate depending on how we move forward. Options for consideration. So the way that these developments can continue to move forward, there's a number of options that we have that we could take. Option A that we have here is that the city files for the annexation application, and it's just specific to the development area. There's some pros and cons to this, and we can go over what those differences are in the next slide. Option B is that the property owner files for the annexation of the application for just the site itself. Option C, which will more than likely happen if the city chooses to just annex the development site only. I have to mention that LAFCO and the county can make a decision to expand the annexation to include the entire island, not just the vacant land. So option C would be for the city of Santa Ana to file for the annexation of the entire island, the entire 24.7 acres of land. Or the property owner could also submit an application for the annexation for the entire island. Other alternatives include having other agencies file for the annexation of the application, or basically have other agencies provide for the local sewer service in order to move the development forward. As far as the differences between whether you have the city or the developer or the owner proceed with the process, there are some items here that we need to consider. So if the city were to pursue, whether it's the entire island or just the vacant property itself, some of the LAFCO processing fees would be waived. If the developer or owner decide to do the application, they would have to pay the full cost. Under the city, there's a greater ability to negotiate a property tax exchange with the county, as well as to negotiate some of the cost recovery items that we have. Code enforcement, in particular in that area, is significant. There are a lot of issues with a commercial and some affordable housing area that exists there, so we would be seeking some reimbursements from the county, and it's a possibility that if the city were to apply, there's a greater likelihood that we would be more successful there. Versus if the developer were to try to negotiate this, it would be very much more difficult for them to generate some these cost recoveries. If the city were to apply, there's a resident and community protest that would be waived. If the developer or owner were to apply, that would not be waived. They would need to have a series of meetings where they would allow the residents and the community to hear this. And also that, there's an opportunity here for the city to seek some type of a reimbursement from the developer if we were to apply. And with that, I'd like to open it up for either
Councilman
questions or
Sarmiento?
comments.
Yeah, thanks, Robert. So we've been talking about this for a while, right? And you're
Correct.
right. It did get stalled on a few desks, just
Correct.
For lack of continuity. But I think it's something I think there's been support for, and it's interesting because I know I lived on Ponderosa, which is right behind and within the island, but behind where the development site area is. So all those multifamilies, they're all on septic and sump pumps.
Correct.
So it's a really horrible condition out there, right? I mean, if you've ever dealt with multifamilies that have a septic system, it's just really, really challenging. So I think there's no problem there. You have some single-family homes behind that
To the
that
north,
abut the
correct.
55.
Uh-huh.
So that requirement number 4 probably is not a bad idea, because if you have to canvass the neighborhood and seek their approval, if it's led by the developer, that would be a little challenging.
Correct.
Just because they're used to being, I guess that would be county and incorporated, right? So they're receiving services from the county. But look, I think both the applicants or both the developers that spoke, they're credible franchises. Yeah, I'm not sure how much, if we have the numbers on what the In-N-Out, both of them that are on Bristol, what do they generate? Any numbers, any guesses on that? I know they do well because their queue is just, all the way down Bristol, around the corner, wraps around Civic Center. So, and my son loves Chick-fil-A, so I know that they'll all do well. They'll both do well, but to the extent that it's a good use of money, to the extent that we can, cost recover as much of it as possible and negotiate some terms, it seems to make sense that we be the lead on this as opposed to the developer, just because there's too many benefits on our side to be able to try to figure out how we can, come to the best terms possible, both with the county and the developers.
Thank you, Councilman Sarmiento. Quick question just on our sewer system, if they were to connect. How old is our sewer system on that part of town?
I'm not sure if, I don't know, but I don't know if Nabil knows how old the system is.
I'm saying the early 70s in that early area.
Early 70s. Is there any update to the system on that part of town anytime soon?
We have a master plan for that, so that particular area is relatively good in capacity and in a good shape in terms of collection system.
Okay.
So we don't see any major need for improvement in that site or that vicinity.
Great, fantastic. The other question that I do have, and as I've been looking very closely at the functionality of taxation, and whether it's property tax or sales tax. I think a lot of times we get excited when we have certain businesses coming or property, but the reality is that when we look at our sales tax, we only get 1%, and 6% goes to the state of California, right? I think we tend to forget about that most of our sales tax is going to the state of California, and they receive very little impact back in our local municipality. And so, even too, the county of Orange receives some of our sales tax and our property tax. And so this is a great benefit to the county of Orange because they're still winners. And so I just asked the question that, that 1%, and definitely I think both of these companies, Chick-fil-A and In-N-Out Burger, are great, businesses and they do very well. But at the same time, just being realistic that, we're not going to receive, a windfall, because again, there's only a certain percent that comes back to the city of Santa Ana. But with that being said, there is opportunity for us to leverage, and being able to annex that and not having to deal with the county eventually is a good thing, but they still benefit at the end of the day, and I just want to make that very clear and put that on the record that they do benefit. And I always tell people, and as I start to have these conversations about the functionality of taxation, is that, Santa Ana's success is the county of Orange's success. Right, because they generate money from local municipalities, the county of Orange, right? Whether it's property tax or it's sales tax, they're receiving a portion. And so, I think that message needs to get back to the county. So it's not like they're doing us a favor, because we're doing them a favor. And more importantly, as we move in this direction, wanting to let In-N-Out and also as well as Chick-fil-A, is that we definitely welcome you guys, we have a Chick-fil-A off of Bristol and 2 In-N-Outs on Bristol as well. And definitely there's always big lines and drive-through. And it's my hope, and I'm not sure, as we move towards autonomous vehicles, it's not if, it's when. And I'm actually speaking in Anaheim on Wednesday about autonomous vehicles. And so how we continue to look at parking, that may change and shift as we move forward with autonomous vehicles. And so how can we be nimble, or you all be nimble as you look at your real estate and as the city updates its general plan and zoning code, that we figure out a way of how we reduce some of that parking, because it's going to change. And just wanting to put that to your guys' attention, because it's not if, it's when, and that will be coming in the near future. And so my other comment I would ask to our city manager is that if we do move in this direction, how long would the process take from, say, doing the resolution to the actual final process?
That's a good
depending
question.
on each of the options we choose to move forward.
Mayor Pro Tem Martinez, in previous discussions we've had with LAFCO for the initial application process, we're looking at maybe 30 to 90 days.
30 days.
certainly we can bring the item before the city council before that, and we can work out a timeline that is more feasible for the project.
So what I would just ask for next steps, that if you all can provide that timeline, again, obviously the developers want certainty. And so if this is approved today, whatever option we so choose to move forward, that there is a timeline that we can provide to them and then provide to the council so that we know what the expectations are and the time frame.
Absolutely, Madam Chair. One of the things that I wanted to hopefully get from this committee is support for one of the options. Councilmember Sarmiento mentioned, the city should take the lead. So we have two options under that scenario. It's option A or option C. Now, our deputy city manager mentioned that even if we go with option A, what we were told is likely that when it goes to committee, the LAFCO committee would probably bump us down to option C. So we want to start at C. We want to take the recommendation from this committee to council, and so that was part of the goal, is to get some direction from this council committee.
I agree.
Motion to approve for option C. Great. Thank you. In the interest of time, we got to move on. Councilman Sarmiento needs to leave at 6:30, so I'm going to move on to the next item, which is 5 housing work group meeting. Stephen.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem and Council Member. This is Steve Mendoza, Executive Director of the CDA. Judson, thank you very much for placing that up. The City of Santa Ana has held 2 separate meetings led by Mayor Pro Tem Martinez, one with the apartment associations and property owners meeting, and that was held on April 23rd, 2018. And then the second one was the resident and tenant meeting, was held the following day on April 24th. Both the CDA and the PBA staff attended to present the same information at both meetings. We wanted to ensure some consistency. And we talked about affordable housing and substandard housing solutions and proactive rental enforcement programs, overview, and potential improvements. Some of the attendees at the apartment owners meetings were the BIA, the CNC Development, a few management companies, a few developers, again, CDA staff and PBA staff, and again, representatives from the city manager's office. The property owner meeting, to summarize, the group discussion include the OC Realtors. They're working on some state legislation from their point. There was some discussion regarding San Bernardino alongside with the California Apartment Association, looked at their existing policies in place and some code enforcement best practices. Shared some of the best practice approaches, which included apartments should have written rules, not verbal rules. They wanted to make sure that that was in stone. Agreements must be made in writing. Property managers are essential to running good apartments. I think we all could agree with that. And the need to educate residents and tenants along their roles and responsibilities as well. They're supportive of completing the general plan and zoning ordinance, which you just had an update on, which will allow developers and investors to move forward with a more predictable process. Then there was the tenant and resident meeting held after that, and a few of the attendees are listed on the slideshow, including Mercy House, some nonprofits, again, staff, and the city manager's office as well. There are a few developers in that as well, and then some property management groups. The tenant-resident meeting, the group discussed impacts of the general plan updates. They were very interested in finding out what's going on with the general plan. By right housing and what that actually meant. Some of the vacant land issues that we have in the city, increased supply of housing at all income levels, which I think we all share those same concerns. Templates for the ADUs. ADUs are the accessory dwelling ordinances that recently took effect in the state of California. And the Public Law Center and legal aid assisting tenants and residents facing displacement. And they were also requesting that the city provide educational bulletins to property owners. And then finally, planning meetings that the city host should incorporate feedback from the community, which I think we're getting closer to achieving. And with that, there's some staff follow-ups. The Planning and Building Agency were to share information from the OC Tax Assessor's Office and bringing up-to-date property titles, and considering modernizing and transferring the rental unit business license and CUPs to Code Enforcement Department. So they'll be looking into that. The change would surface poorly. It would help with poorly run properties. And a follow-up with the California Apartment Association to host a workshop on reviewing and revisiting these policies and best practices. It was pretty clear that this was just a first meeting and maybe they'd like to be involved in future discussions. And for the CDA responsibilities, that's our department, is provide a toolkit and resources to all attendees. Again, we were going to bring this update to the City Council in June, but we wanted to get some input from the subcommittee to see if there is any input we can incorporate into our June update. With that, it's a receive and file for the City Council in June. Some of the affordable housing and substandard solutions, these are some of the ideas that came out of it. I'm not sure if you needed any detail on it, but they were going to list this on the screen. And then one more detail is some potential improvements that they saw for the city. With that, that completes our update to the committee. And with that, we'll be scheduling this for a June City Council meeting.
Thank you, Mr. Mendoza. Councilman Sarmiento.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So this was, and I'm really glad that Mayor Pro Tem hosted a meeting with both groups. I know that I think I had agendized it as an 85A a few months ago, and we weren't able to get the work study group going. And it is because, it's very sensitive, so you have both groups that are somewhat polarized, and we see that now with this initiative or referendum that's being circulated by some of the groups for rent control. So it just goes and speaks to the fact that, housing is at such a critical level. And so, that's why I wanted to put it on as an 85A, because what I was hoping we could do is diffuse the really the crisis level that people were feeling because rents were spiking, inventory was low, people were doubling and tripling up. There's secondary impacts from families having to live, again, maybe 10 to 12 to a unit. And so just all these things that really burden us. And so I thought before anybody makes a rash decision like wanting to go to rent control and realizing there may be some unintended consequences as a result of that, let's do as much to address some of the low-hanging fruit, right? Take care of that and, worry about some of these conditions that people are living in that are really not good, right? So you have some really outdated inventory that you have absentee owners, owners that live out of state, they ignore their property, they don't have any property management company or manager living on site or even in the state. So it leads to conditions where you have this community that is being abused. I mean, quite frankly, it's an abuse when you have people whose average median income is somewhere 10 to 12,000 a year, and they're being their rents are being spiked on them and increased at a rate that's really, really difficult. So I think it's good. I think these are good first steps. I think, more conversation needs to be had. I know Lou Penrose with the Orange County Apartment Association met with me, and, I know Matt Buck, but they're both obviously certainly interested in sitting down and meeting. And I think, not sure if we had the Lacey neighborhood here as one of the tenant groups that might have met, but they're the ones who were kind of driving this originally. But some of the stuff that is in here that was proposed by the property managers seems to be already codified, law. So, having things in writing, having a lease agreement, having things like that. I don't know if it's going to cure any problems. I think that we need to be a little bit more assertive and realizing what are our community standards. I think right now 50% of our residents are tenants, or close. It's either 48, 49, but it's a large number. I think that they have rights that we should make sure are respected, while at the same time making sure that our apartment owners who are responsible are, supported by us as well, because some of them are very responsible. You go to some developments and they're really well cared for, they're well maintained, very low turnover rate, and then you have others that are just horrible, right? They really are third world conditions. And so those are the ones we can all agree on, and those are probably the ones where there's most abuse, where it's an easy fix, or an easier fix, because it's easier to identify the uninhabitable conditions. So we have enough partners, that do housing, law and advocacy for tenants, that we can maybe incorporate them. But retaliatory evictions, unjust evictions, I think are not good either, because you have somebody who's saying we have rodents, and as soon as they whistle blow on that, look, they're given their 3-day notice, and so those things aren't good either. So to the extent we can maybe try to put something together, and I'm glad they met, I just think we need to come up with some good policy now.
Great. Thank you, Councilmember Sarmiento, and I definitely agree. My next step, and I know staff doesn't want to be involved, I'll be bringing both groups together. And so I look forward to that. It's going to be a great dialogue, and I'll be asking our staff to be coordinating that meeting, to have that honest conversation, because I think that we need to bring both groups together to have an honest conversation about housing solutions here in the city. I did make some recommendations that have not been put on this, because I think the staff wanted just to share the perspective of what they heard from the group, but I did give some recommendations, Councilman Sarmiento, as well. And some of those were, one, possibly currently now through our CDBG process, we use 2 organizations, and help me if you don't mind, Judson, who are the 2 organizations? Fair Housing Council and the Public Law Center. And, for whatever reason, and, I'm not sure what the results have been, but we are funding them in the tune of a couple $100,000, and figuring out how can we navigate for them to focus more in helping our residents with the evictions and these other things. And if not, I did ask our city attorney and our city manager, is it possibly that we can do an RFP and RFQ and hire our own attorneys that would be able to work here instead of using the law center or others, so that we have direct connection and still using those CDBG funds. I'm not sure if it's too late for that or not, as they bring this to you all in June, and CDBG's coming up before us, so that we have a handle and we could actually fully monitor what's going on, since we are giving them those funds. The other thing is that many of our residents did speak about how they don't qualify for affordable housing because they don't meet the threshold of how much they actually make a year, and so they don't qualify. A lot of our residents don't make more than $30,000, $25,000 a year, and so to meet that criteria, they're nowhere near it. And so they don't have that opportunity. And so those that are being displaced and cannot qualify, how can we figure out a way, as we have these in lieu these WHO funds now, to help, because it is a serious problem, in looking at some kind of bridge funding, for those that may be getting evicted, or those that are being challenged because their rents are being increased. And we've heard at the public comments at the city council and in this meeting that there are property owners that have raised rents of 10%, not once, but up to 3 times in 1 year. If that is true or not, I don't know. I know we need to do a little bit more digging. But if that is the case, we definitely need to take action immediately and identify who is doing that. Because at the end of the day, we do have a responsibility to making sure that our residents are being treated equally. Just because they're at a disadvantage, they should not be taken advantage of. And that was one of the main contentions that we had with the tenants, and how this is happening, and how they are not receiving that help. And so I hope that we can look at some of those policies. The other issue that was brought up as well was moving forward. forward, as we continue to support the development community and new housing stock does become available, what is that going to look like? And two, how are we going to be able to spread that throughout the city, that those units that are being built are actually being built for the residents in this community, not people coming from the outside here because the rents are cheaper. And this is what we've been experiencing, is that the housing that we have been building, because our residents are not eligible, what's happening is that we have outside people coming in and moving in, and our residents are still living in third world conditions. And so I guess, who are we building for? Who are we trying to support is a big policy question that we need to ask ourselves when we are contributing to the development community to build affordable housing, but affordable housing for who? Orange County, or affordable housing for the city of Santa Ana? And, I want to change the terminology of affordable housing and call it, because at the end of the day, it has this bad connotation. But, I really believe that it needs to be attainable housing. We need to make sure that the housing that we have here in this city is attainable for all. And that is the new word that Locust is using in their initiative throughout the country, and not using the name affordable anymore, and using attainable housing solutions as we move forward. And I think that's a good name, that we should aim to making sure that housing is attainable for all in the city of Santa Ana. And so those are just my comments. I look forward to working with you, Mr. Mendoza, to schedule that next meeting. If you're more than welcome to attend. If you don't want to attend, I definitely understand. But I'm going to have that meeting because I was just asked too from the residents and the developer side, what are the next steps beyond just bringing a report to the council? They want to see actual policies in place. They want to know what are some next steps for the city to take before this end of this year. I'm definitely in agreement, and I do believe that beyond just sharing a report, we do need to have some sound policies to start seeing some small, results to helping the not only our residents, but also holding accountable those property owners that are not doing their best and are really painting a bad picture for the rest of the good property owners. We had one property owner, Mr. Colombo, who is a great property owner, has over 300 units in this city, and definitely goes beyond what he should be doing as a property owner. And he's a great example. Obviously, don't expect everyone to be like Mr. Colombo, but at least meet the basic threshold and assuring that, they treat and respect and create dignified housing for those that are their tenants currently now and into the future. Because it is very problematic when we're hearing these stories and we yet have been able to not take the steps forward to help address these issues. And then lastly, on the PrEP program, wanting to move that forward to increase to the $80. When you look at the PrEP program, and we have over 32,000 property units that need to be inspected, and in 3 years, we have only been able to inspect 8,000 or 6,000, of that sort. We're obviously behind, and if you look at our code enforcement integrated approach, as Supervisor Nunez likes to call it, comparison to other cities where they have dedicated inspectors just to inspecting the rental units. We need to move in that direction, and we need to do that immediately so that we can start inspecting those units. But obviously, we did realize that there are unintended consequences, as Councilman Sarmiento said, that when we do go in and inspect, something's wrong. And or if a tenant reports, there can be some consequences. And so we need to be very cautious, but at the same time, making sure that we do all we can to make sure that these properties are up to par and up to the standards of the city of Santa Ana as we move forward. Thank you. Going to move forward with the next item, which is number 6, which is the update on the purchase of real property. I'll call on Nabil. Oh, actually, yeah, Nabil, if we can just, if you can just do all yours all at the same time, that would be fantastic.
No pressure.
Yes, do yours all. You won't be long. Yes, number 4, 5, yes, yep. I'm like, it makes sense for you to do both.
Sure. Just a real quick update city. We know that we have quite a bit of wells in the distribution system that have been constructed in the early 60s, and in an effort to replace and be ready to drill additional wells, we've located a site, 202 Flower. That's the other one. Anyway, we've found a site that is next to our Walnut pumping station, a pump station that is key to our facility, and it's being reconstructed right now. So we've found this site that is vacant right now, and we have a willing seller to the site, and we plan to purchase the site to drill a water well as a replacement well for the pump station. We'll just go to the site really quick, the map. Yeah, this is where the yellow square is. What is this? I don't know what that is. No. Which one?
Who's doing that?
There you go. I'm not going to touch it. I'm done here anyway. So with the yellow square is where the site is. On the right upper corner is where the pump station is, and it's surrounded by the tennis courts at First and Flower. The site there is very close to the pump station. We have well 33 on the upper left. That is a well, and it looks like a house, but we do have a well that feeds that pump station, and we also have well 29 that does the same, feed into the pump station. This new well will, again, allow us to pump more groundwater, which is something that the Orange County Water District is planning on, and we just recently have succeeded in allowing cities within the county to pump more than 75% of our capacity, up to 77% this coming year from our groundwater, and in the future we would be ready to pump 80% hopefully. So this is our attempt to enhance the water system and replace aging wells. And that concludes my presentation on that one. Okay, so without the presentation, I just wanted to give you a brief update on our engagement with the Santa Ana Unified School District and Tustin Unified, and also Garden Grove Unified School District, to sample for lead in the schools. There is a mandate from the state that came on October 17 that requires that the water system or the city front the money and the cost to sample all schools for lead, from 1 to 25 samples per schools. The school district has requested that, all three of them requested that we do the sampling for them. And the compliance schedule, we are required to complete the samples by July 2019. That's the update. And one thing about findings, if we do find a lead sample that exceeds the action level for lead, it would be the Unified School District responsibility to remediate that high reading. So we will do the sampling, they do the fixing, basically. And just a quick note on our outreach for lead. We've started reaching out to our residents, and we have formulated a fact sheet about lead and the sources of lead in our drinking water ever since the Flint, Michigan situation occurred, and we've been reaching out to our residents, providing them with some information. It's both in print, the fact sheet, and also on the website. And just a final note, the source of lead in water is really mostly in Southern California, is from the pottery that people use to cool the water. A lot of it is decorated with lead paint. People put the water in the lead in those potteries with a faucet on them to cool the water, and the lead really leaches from those containers into the drinking water. That is the source of lead in Southern California, and it's not our drinking water. With that, I conclude the presentation. Any questions?
Thank you, Nabil. Any questions, Councilman Sarmiento? No, great. Thank you. Next items, we are moving towards We are 4-5, so we're going to small cell wireless, and then to presentation on local underground utility, and then update on the portal jack. And then finally, 10, oh no, we actually got that. Those are the last 3 items. Oh, we're making great time. Okay.
Why don't you just have Jack take?
Let's just
His-
do,
he's got
yes,
2
the,
items.
first and last name, please.
Jack Chula, Chief Technology Innovations Officer, Information Technology Department. Let me get the presentation up real quick. Okay. So this is an update on the open data and portal and Esri system. So the city of Santa Ana has been using, I'm going to start with GIS, or with the Esri GIS first, and then I'll kind of reverse the order and move into the open data. The city of Santa Ana has been using GIS since the 90s for quite some time, but it was only about 5 years ago that we switched over from the Bentley system to the Esri system. And when that occurred, the strategy that was used is they were just using personal geo-based databases and not a central enterprise GIS database. So last year we began a project where we were going to implement Esri's enterprise GIS database and consolidate all these different elements into one centralized database instead of scattered throughout the network. We also adopted Esri's local government information model, which is a set of standards, if you will, that Esri has put together for local governments that have common data elements and have certain benefits for that. So we went ahead and we have test and production servers that we've put into place and configured with the local government model. We've implemented the local government model. We've begun implementing certain layers on it. We've done 50 layers so far in that model. But those 50 that model is only going to be about 1/4 of the total layers that we end up having in the GIS system, because there's a lot of individual city-specific elements that we're going to have, such as assets, utility information, and other things that Esri doesn't have as part of their standards. So the standard is a good starting point, and it gives us about 1/4 of the way, but there's going to be a lot that we're going to need to add into it afterwards. This slide here shows the local government model that Esri provides. The black layers on there in black font are ones we've already loaded up and configured. The blue ones are ones we're still working on, and as I mentioned, there's going to be a lot more coming after the blue as well. After we get the database set up, the next step is to get what Esri calls their enterprise-based deployment, which are the servers and the portals that connect to the database and make the information available to internal staff as well as external staff. So we are working on configuring the server for that right now. We are also buying a reverse proxy, which will allow the internal servers to present data to people externally. So right now we're using Esri's ArcGIS Online, which is a little bit more expensive. They have credits, but once we get that set up, we'll be able to create our own have our own portal that's available externally. Future plans include, once we have the data in the local government model, Esri provides a lot of pre-built apps and solutions that, using that data, we can make available on in our portal and available to the public immediately. So we'll be able to start doing that. We're going to expand out the open data portal that we have already currently available in Esri, but we have very little on it right now, which is why we don't really promote it. And so now moving on to the open data. The open data strategy right now is to not have one single portal or one single tool to provide data because we have different types of data in different formats, and there are different tools that perhaps work better for it. So one is obviously the GIS type data, the geographic data, and story maps. We think the Esri tool will be very beneficial for that. We have a financial portal that will present financial and checkbook data. That's already available out on our website. I provide the link for that as well. We have a records portal that the city clerk has established where we have official city records where people can go in and access the official city records online. That's available right now. So those three are available. The GIS one is very limited, but those three are available. And then the fourth one that we're working on is the data portal, which will have raw data sets and dashboards. And that portal is going to be, the implementation of that portal is tied to the website redesign project, so it's something we're working on right now. We're doing the website first, and we're starting up now the open data side. We're working with PD and planning and building to find out, permitting and crime data and things that we need to put on. We need to establish programs that will pull the data out of those systems, put them into a data warehouse, and then make them available onto this portal for the public to download. And that concludes my report.
Great, thank you, Jack. Any questions, Councilman Sarmiento? Nope, thank you for the update. Let's go, William.
Well, while that presentation is up, I just wanted to just say that the work that's being done on the small cell site is being helped by Magellan, which is a contractor we just brought on board to help us with the the purchase of street lights and all of the optimization and all the network that can go on. But the first task that was given to them is to help us come up with small cell site protocols so we can move that forward.
Where's our policy at? Is that in here, coming before us? I know all right.
That's what we're working on. That's what this
I was
is.
going to grill you guys on that.
Well, William Galvez, Acting Public Works Director. Good evening, Madam Chair and Committee Member Sarmiento. I wanted to just briefly touch on where we're at, how we got here, and where we're going in regards to the small cell sites facility ordinance. Just a quick background on the regulatory framework. We've been working with our consultant, Jory Wolf of Magellan. And so we're considering the Telecommunications Act of 1996 and, of course, our own Santa Ana Municipal Code 33-230, which is the macro cell sites ordinance in place. And so it's obvious that we have to update our ordinance. The advancement of technology has required data 2,500 times more than just 10 years ago. So it's obvious we have to update our ordinance. And then we're also excited to be acquiring 8,000 streetlights from Edison, which will basically enhance the assets we have available for small cell sites. The process that we're looking at is to review existing cities and their existing small cell site ordinances, including the cities of Santa Monica, Long Beach, Huntington Beach, and Vallejo. And of course, with input from Magellan, we are looking at our ordinance, and we've the recommendation is to use the existing ordinance in place that the city has. We don't have to establish a whole new ordinance. We can amend what we currently have. And we're getting input from IT, of course, City Attorney's Office, Planning and Building. And one of the biggest recommendations that we're looking at is to make that draft available for public vetting and also input from the utilities, so that when we bring the actual draft to the council for first reading, it's already gone through that process. So I think that's really important. And I will go through the timeline at the very end here, but just a few considerations that we have ongoing. Some distinguishing characteristics is we obviously have to update all of our definitions to include small cell site facilities. We're looking at consideration for zero net poles. To protect the aesthetics in the city, we don't want to continually add more and more facilities and poles. So maybe if we make this something that we have in our ordinance, if somebody comes in with a new pole, maybe the requirement would be that we take an existing street light down and put one of theirs in, and it would still have a street light lamp for the city to use, but then it would have the facilities that the small cell sites would include. A couple of pictures here show that these poles are actually aesthetically pleasing. They're not that bad to look at. Some other streamlining that we're looking at is perhaps if the facilities are within a certain volume, that the notification requirements don't need to be adhered to. The existing macro cell sites require 300-foot radius notifications. In actual practice, we're notifying residents and businesses within 500 feet. Maybe if we have certain parameters met, maybe we don't have to do that. So that's something that we'd like council and committee input. Some of the other things that we're considering is maybe at the time of application that the utilities post the bond. That would ensure that they're really serious and not just getting their foot in the door to reserve the rights for particular locations. Again, we have 8,000 sites in the city, but moving forward into the future, you can see how getting a bond would make it to where they're posting a bond in order to reserve that site, and then we actually take them through the application process. The other aspect that we're looking into is the revenue. What kind of revenue are we looking at for using city facilities and the public right-of-way? And our discussions so far have ranged between $1,500 and $2,500 per year per location. So that's something that we could further discuss. And another provision is for the utilities to be required to put in some city fiber so that we can then, eventually have our own fiber system in place. So those are some of the elements that we're working on. We don't have a full striked up version, but I don't know if Jack has anything to add, but just really quick, the timeline. We're completing our draft ordinance review this month. In June, if we're allowed to go that route where we're getting utility companies the allowance for comments, we could do that in June. And so then in July, we can finalize the draft ordinance and bring it to the council for first reading, and then we can adopt something second reading in September. And then, of course, an ordinance would be fully in place, say, by November of this year. The exciting part of this schedule is that we could also use the 8,000 streetlights that we're buying from Edison. Those streetlights would be fully transitioned to the city. So this is kind of a look-ahead timeline. I don't know if you have anything to add, Jack?
Yeah, the one thing I would like to add is that this is the first step that kind of leads into the fiber master planning. So Magellan, who's our consultant, as they complete this, they're now going to start developing out what we want our fiber master plan to look like. And part of where the real opportunity here is, as the cell providers come in and look at where they're going to put cells, they're going to determine whether they need to dig and put in fiber, if they already have fiber. And if it's on our master plan, if they're putting in fiber in an area where we need fiber, we can hopefully with the ordinance have them throw in some conduit or some fiber that we can use. Or as part of the negotiations of the master license agreements, some other cities have done some in-kind trades where maybe instead of a certain amount per pole, they provided a certain amount per pole plus use of their already existing fiber. And some cities have gotten immediate access to fiber by doing exchanges in that way as well.
Jack,
So-
I don't mean to cut you off, but it's almost 6:30. We
Okay,
got to get
I'll
to
go-
the next item. Is there any questions, Councilman Sarmiento?
No, just a quick comment. When it comes back to council, or when it comes to council, to the extent we can do a little bit of mapping just to show where the sites are, where the lights are that we're going to acquire from Edison, just to give us an idea of where some of those dead spots are and where we need to go. It's always something helpful for the public and for the residents to understand.
To the extent that we have that information, we sure would be happy to provide. We were asking for that information as from the small cell site providers. They've been a little reluctant, but they're hearing that why we want to. They're coming at us with 10 or 20. We said we'd like to see what the master plan is working on that. One of the things that I wanted to point out is the idea by staff to have some pre-selected fixtures that are not, as aesthetically pleasing as they can be, and if they are using those to expedite the process instead of having the notification and all that. So we're trying to find ways and incentives to try to get as quickly as possible.
Yeah, and my comments just as we do the Internet of Things, and I talked about autonomous vehicles, people think it's foreign, that it's not going to be coming. The private sector disrupts faster than government, so it is coming. And so ways that we can facilitate that as we move forward with what we're doing now. So be forward thinking and look at what kind of infrastructure, because the Googles, they're all going to come and they're going to need these sensors, right? And so how can we capitalize that? Let's be forward thinking on that. And then my final question is that we said very fast, I know the deadline, September, I think we said May, but that's not going to be there. And I just want to state that I am gone for the month of July. I'm actually going to the Harvard program, the JFK Kennedy School. So I'm gone the whole month of July. And so, me coming back, I'm going to be gone a whole month. I'm being immersed. And so I'm not going to know. And so if I can at least get briefs or a template before June so I can provide my comments, because I'm going to be gone the entire month of July, would be greatly appreciated. And then we do have one member of the public that wishes to speak. If you could please, real quickly, as we're going to our last item, and this is Robert.
Robert Jysted with Crown Castle. Just wanted to let you know that we're very happy to work with you on this. Obviously, we'll have a lot of ideas. I can tell you that we have plans now to build well over 200 nodes in Santa Ana. I oversee Orange County and the Inland Empire. Santa Ana is one of our principal cities. We have a lot of work to do here. We're really excited to do that and happy to work with you on developing the ordinance.
Fantastic. Thank you so very much. Final item.
William Galvez again, Acting Public Works Director. I wanted to take you through the utility underground districts and something that's going to be coming to council very soon. The benefits of underground utility are obvious: improving aesthetics, walkability, improving public safety, and the reliability of service, and of course property values would increase. Two main funding sources for underground utility districts via the Southern California Edison and CPUC is Rule 20A and 20B funding. The most significant difference is that Rule 20A funding pays for the majority of costs, while Rule 20B funding, the participation from Edison's funding is a little more limited. I wanted to point out that the current balance for underground districts is $1.5 million, and we accrue about $500,000 annually. So under the CPUC rules, we're able to mortgage up to 5 years ahead. So with the current balance and the $500,000 annual accrual, we think that by 2021 we would have a little over $6 million available for undergrounding efforts. And the two areas that we're doing quite a bit of construction is, as you know, Bristol and now Warner. So the status of the Bristol Street Underground Utility District, what I wanted to point out is that the underground district already exists. It was established in 1993, and several segments of Bristol have already been undergrounded. There is a few future districts that we'd like to underground, and we believe that the Bristol project can pay for those undergrounding efforts, and so we would be applying Rule 20B funds to Bristol Street. What we'd like to bring before the council is the undergrounding district to create one for Warner between Main and Grand. In order to use Rule 28 funds for Warner, we need to actually establish a district. And so we would take a resolution to establish a district to City Council. So council action is required. And we would break up Warner to underground in two phases, Main to Oak in 2020. That would involve approximately 30 utility poles at a cost of about $2.2 million. And the second phase would be Oak to grand in 2021, and that would involve about 50 poles or 3.8 million. And as you can see, that picture there shows you what we're up against currently on Warner. Obviously, that situation would be changed. We'd have wide sidewalks and absolutely. So we provided a cash flow to show you that we can underground Warner if the utility district is established by council. We have a plan here that would allow us to underground Warner as the Warner widening project occurs. So we didn't want to catch council off guard, but again, Bristol Underground Utility District already exists, and Bristol can pay for that using Rule 20B funds. For Warner, we would use. We could use 20A for Bristol, but Bristol. Well, we can use either 20A or 20B for Warner, but Warner has a greater need, and the cash flow for Warner is that we need the funding now. So the Rule 20A funds make sense because, again, by 2020 we will have over $6 million, and that's pretty much, it matches the need for Warner. So by creating or establishing an underground utility district for Warner, we will be undergrounding Bristol, but we will also be undergrounding Warner. And so that would be our recommendation when we go to the council next month.
Great. Any questions? No? Any questions on staff, comments? Fantastic. This meeting is adjourned.
Thank you.